So here I'm going to go over what I recommend in terms of the overall approach to ACT reading passages. The general idea is that we've got essentially 8 minutes per passage, and within that 8 minutes, we want to spend the first 3 minutes or so reading, I'm going to say reading/skimming and annotating. And an advantage of the paper ACT is that you can annotate right on the page. We want to keep the annotations brief and efficient, but I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll have 5 minutes to answer the questions and reread as needed. And I would honestly be rereading on every question selectively, and I'll show you again what I mean by that. Now, this is going to take longer than 8 minutes because I'll be talking and explaining and reading out loud, etc., but that's the kind of breakdown we want to have in mind. Okay, and so informational, as they call it here. We're just going to go ahead and get started. It says the passage is adapted from this article. Okay, notes from a wedding. First paragraph. It was never Kenny Holmes's intention to become a wedding singer. The grandson of West Indian immigrants, Holmes was raised in Gordon Heights on Long Island in what he calls a small black community founded by like-minded thinkers, families of immigrants and Southern blacks who, as Holmes says, didn't come here to fool around, and who handed down to their children their own keen sense of ambition. Okay, so I'm just going to say here, Kenny Holmes's beginnings. Okay. Not the greatest annotation in the world, but we just want to get something down for each paragraph to sort of make sure that we're not just reading it and totally forgetting it as we do so. Okay, next paragraph is going to be really brief, so I'm going to connect these two and call them one paragraph. So we grew up in that kind of atmosphere, he says, of positive thinking, of getting educated, whether or not you had a degree. Like any American boy in the 50s and 60s, he was fascinated with popular music. He listened to the area's one radio station, which mostly played Sinatra. Sometimes in the evening, with a coat hanger stuck into the top of his portable radio, he could pick up a faint signal from WWRL, a rhythm and blues station in New York City. When he was a teenager, his brother brought home a guitar. I was 16. It was a Sunday night. I sat down and played I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I was addicted. Okay, so here I'm just going to say musical beginnings, because it's continuing to talk about his childhood, but bringing in more specifically the idea of music and how he got interested in it. So while not a virtuoso, he discovered good at making money at it. He learned 3 songs, Satisfaction, And I Love Her, and Shotgun, and formed a band. We went out and sold it, he says. We could play those 3 songs all night. We got pretty popular out on the island, playing Battle of the Bands, fire halls, high school, proms for $10 a night. So here I'm just going to say band, money. Formed a band, made money. Still, a career as a musician was not what he or his family had in mind. Over the next 4 years, he says, I did everything I could not to be a guitar player. I went to college not to be a guitar player. Thinking he would be a psychiatrist, he took pre-med classes but didn't complete a degree. Along the way, he continued playing nightclubs and parties. So I'm just going to say college. Okay. In his mid-20s, he visited his brother in Washington. Washington looked to Holmes like a good place to be an ambitious, career-minded black man, but it also had a thriving music scene in nightclubs and hotel lounges, and the next 15 years played out as a sort of tussle between his creative pursuits and his more business-driven impulses. Trying to work his way up in the music scene, he played 5 and 6 nights a week in nightclubs and wrote his own music. He started a recording studio called Sound Ideas, which trawled local talent for the makings of a hit song, but he found the pickings slim. So here I'm going to say music versus business. I mean, there is more to it, but the tension between focusing on music and focusing on business, kind of what they're getting at there. So the club scene, after a long while, began to wear on him as well. Unwilling to resign himself to the life of a starving artist, when an agent approached him in the early 90s about specializing in wedding and private parties, he decided to do it. So here I'm going to say shift. Shift in what? Shift in his career, shift in his emphasis. I'm just going to say shift, though. It was a revelation. I could make in one night what I used to make in 5, and it changed the culture of what I was doing. So he's making more money now. Holmes was well suited for the role of event band leader. His production skills helped him control his band's sound, and his familiarity with country, big band, etc. made him popular with audiences who wanted, as he says, a tango or Viennese waltz, as well as Wilson Pickett, a soul singer. So varied styles that he could play. Because business ebbs and flows with the seasons and the economy, Holmes has always kept a variety of sidelines, including a job driving a limousine for 9 years to put his oldest daughter through a private high school and college. These days, at gigs, he hands out a stack of $1 million bills printed with his image and his current enterprises: band leader, commercial mortgage broker, hard money lender. So here I'll say something like odd jobs. I mean, like different jobs that he does to support himself when music doesn't make the ends meet on its own. So he uses as many as 8 musicians and 2 singers for weddings. He accepts turnover as a fact of running a band, but his current core lineup has, in the mercurial or up and down world of part-time performances, been fairly steady. Sam Bronner, the drummer, and Atiba Taylor, the sax player, have played with him for 3 and 4 years respectively. Okay, and I'm just going to say here, band personnel. A little bit about the personnel. This is perhaps partly because Holmes insists on making music. During performances, so what is this? I think the fact that certain people have stayed with him. During performances, he lets his musicians take the lead and uses specialized stripped-down tracks called digital sequences to set the tempo and fill in parts when necessary, ultimately preferring the messy alchemy of live music to something more canned. The musicians say that this is in contrast to other band leaders they've worked for, who often rely heavily on recordings and use musicians more as visual props. Holmes's respect for the music endears him to his musicians. These guys play from the heart. So basically they're saying here he's a good band leader in terms of, what it's like for other musicians to work with him. And so zooming out here, literally zooming out, this is what I think it should look like after that first pass through the passage. So how many words do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 20. But the thing is, this is a way to, efficiently keep track of what we've read, just getting the skeleton, and get the basic skeleton of what's going on in the passage, knowing that any more, fine details that we need, we can go back and get in the context of answering the questions. Okay, now on to the questions. What we're going to do is start with the ones that mention either specific lines or specific paragraphs, and then come back to the ones that we're circling here. So the first 2 are broader questions. Which one occurred last chronologically? Again, I'm going to circle that one because that's something that requires, again, maybe a better understanding of the whole passage. And we'll get a better understanding as we answer these more narrow, specific questions. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to zero in on is going to be number 14. And while this doesn't mention a specific line, it does give us a proper noun and some dates. And so that gives us something that we can, again, zero in on in the passage. So how would we describe the residents of Gordon Heights in the 50s and 60s? Okay, here, Gordon Heights, like-minded thinkers, families who didn't come here to fool around, who had a sense of ambition, of getting educated. So they're focused on education, and they were ambitious. So driven and optimistic, positive thinking, getting educated. Yes, so we want to make sure that both of those check out, because it's quite possible that we could have an answer choice that was partly correct, halfway correct, but driven and optimistic checks out on both of those fronts. And so I'm going to just underline that there just to emphasize that that's where we got our answer. Okay, the main purpose of the third paragraph, lines 13 to 22. So here's where our little paragraph summaries can be really helpful to say something about his musical beginnings. A is too narrow. It's not about why he preferred this to that. It's not talking about parents disapproving of it. It's describing what inspired him to start playing music. Okay, so if we do these little summaries, we end up answering at least some of the questions before even getting to them. And then maybe the same thing will happen here. So 23 to 31, the fourth paragraph, the idea is that playing in a band was a way to make money. So, no. Yes, his band was able to earn money. And then despite having a limited repertoire, well, remember, it says that they had 3 songs. And so that's a pretty limited repertoire, but they were still able to make money. And so that's that. It doesn't say that they were a national phenomenon, and it doesn't say that they would have had more success if they had taken the time to learn more songs. It's possible, but it just doesn't say that. Okay. 17, we might know where to find that, given that it brings in this stuff about weddings about halfway through, but I'm going to circle that anyway because we want to get to the other ones that mention specific lines. So here's yet another one that asks about the main idea of a paragraph. This one is talking about the personnel in his band. We can get a little more precise there and say that it is focusing on the idea that there is some turnover, but his core lineup has been pretty steady. Relatively consistent for a business with a high turnover rate. So that's going to be H. 19 is an inference question. We're going to circle that one because it doesn't give us a specific line reference. And then number 20, something more canned. So the alchemy of live music to something more canned. That would be like, well, pre-recorded music. Recorded music. I guess pre-recorded is a little bit redundant because when else are you going to record it if not beforehand? Okay, so at this point we have answered 20, 18, 16, 15, and 14, and we've got 5 left. Okay, at this point we want to be selective in terms of which ones we want to do next, but I think we can go ahead and answer this main purpose question. What is it doing? If we step back and look at the passage as a whole, it's describing this musician's, this person's, Kenny Holmes's, sort of path to becoming a successful wedding musician. Okay, so it's not about his musical tastes. It's not about how his professional life affects his personal life. It's not about the different instruments. It's how he became an enterprising or a successful band leader. Okay, we probably could have gotten that the first time through, but I always like to just go ahead and, circle those, come back to them after we've had a chance to do that additional rereading in the course of answering those specific questions. Okay, a theme of the passage, and here we'll just go ahead and do it. We want to have evidence that supports our answer. I feel like there could be multiple themes, but let's just go through them. So one's previous experiences and pursuits can be useful in achieving success. Maybe. Talent is the most important factor. So that's an extreme phrase, and it doesn't guarantee that it's wrong, but we would really need to see that emphasized. And I don't think they're emphasizing that he is someone of extraordinary talent. Recognizing one's limitations is necessary in overcoming one's failures. I don't think it says a lot about failures. Pursuing one's dreams should take precedence over more practical matters. Okay, so where do we find evidence that either supports F or H? So it was never his intention to become a wedding singer. Okay, how did he become a wedding singer then? Through a sort of, series of maybe not accidents, but things that happened along the way. He visited his brother. He tried to work his way up in the music scene. It didn't quite work out. The club scene sort of wore on him. He had this revelation. His previous experiences and pursuits. So he was well suited for this role. He had these production skills that he had built up earlier. He had this experience playing different kinds of music, and so that's going to be the correct answer, F. It doesn't really talk about a limitation so much, but his previous experiences and pursuits, even if they weren't part of the plan, even if this whole thing wasn't a big plan to become a wedding singer, those things helped him. And then which of these occurred last chronologically? Let's just see what we can eliminate here. So Bronner joined Holmes's band. So that happened 3 years ago. When did he start driving a limousine? 9 years ago. So that means he started driving a limousine before Bronner joined his band. So that can't be right. What about Taylor? So if Taylor has been playing with him for 4 years, that means that she joined his band before Bronner did. And so now it's a matter of when Bronner joined his band versus when he started Sound Ideas. Sound Ideas, that's a proper noun. We should be able to find it. And you might be looking at it and saying, it's over there, it's over there. I don't quite see it. Is Sound Idea there? Okay. He started that way back then, Sound Ideas. And so the thing that happened last was Bronner joined his band. So I would never try to answer one of these questions based on memory. That's just why we want to leave time for rereading, because we're just not going to memorize those things as we read. So that would be that one. And then there are 2 left? Okay. 17. The main reason he eventually preferred playing music at weddings and private parties to playing music in clubs was that, and here, I just saw that here, the club scene began to wear on him, and he didn't make much money. He could make in one night what he used to make in 5. So weddings and private parties were more profitable. I don't want to cross that out. I want to underline that and say that is correct. Yeah, while he could play, let's see, just want to make sure that is the main reason. Yeah, so he did play a variety of music, but that's not what he cites. The revelation and the important thing is that he could make more money. Okay. So that's going to be the correct answer on 17. And then finally, number 19, an inference question. His band members like playing with music because in contrast to other band leaders, he was a good band leader. He gave them some freedom and actually cares about making music as opposed to just getting through the night. Allows band members to showcase their talents during gigs. And again, do we have direct support for that? He lets the musicians take the lead. He gives them a chance to showcase their talents. Okay. And so our answers here are in order: D, F, B, G, D, G, C, H, B, J. The D, F, B, G, D, G, C, H, B, J.